Afternoon all. There's been, I think, a few requests for covering the Tata Steel tournament. Carlsen had a beautiful game yesterday. I thought we could have a look at that. So knight f3, knight f6. He's like a Mozart equivalent in chess with the English opening. So c4, c5, and it's an opening I've vowed to give up myself, but seeing Carlsen play it is always inspiring. So how did he play it here? Knight c3, e6. Gashimov is a rising kind of star. If you look at his FIDE rating progress, he's made steady progress, and he's at rank 10, I think, in the world at the moment. So very dangerous player indeed. So he's chosen this system which, after g3, he tries to kind of parry this bishop on the diagonal with his own fianchettoed bishop. So b6, after both bishops fianchetto, now white castles, bishop e7, and now Carlsen breaks open the centre with d4, which leaves some issues here which are worth kind of exploring, I think, after this move d4, because it transforms the position actually. It gives white, after this exchange here and queen takes d4, a 3-2 pawn majority, pressure on the d file, and maybe d6. Later black's going to play a pawn to d6. But black is often, with this pressure, is going to play for a6 and b5 at some point. So it sort of defines the strategic plans based on pawn structure here, this adjustment. Okay, so d6, and actually some of the forcing sequences get linked up with themes here. So bishop g5, with the idea of not going for like a hack attack with queen h4, but actually with the idea of exchanging soon on f6 to bring pressure to bear on d6 again. So just really getting that bishop out of the way is kind of useful, because bishop's kind of awkward in this pawn chain. Sometimes it's awkward anyway, and this knight might be more useful for rerouting later. You know, maybe you know, to e5 or c5 later. In some hedgehog games, that's often quite useful. So actually, after a6, you know, Magnus wasn't concerned about giving up his dark square bishop here. He played actually bishop takes f6, so no battery with queen h4. You know, no kind of hack attack intention. It's just d6 is the central focus here. So that's really kind of playing on the specific nuances of the position, that d6 is really subject for frontal attack. Okay, but giving up the bishop here you might consider a bit risky. Where does he move his queen? Actually, he moves it to f4. Doesn't mind, of course, e5. That's just going to emphasize white's control of d5 here if black dares to play e5. That's not really on the cards. From f4, of course, d6 pressure is going to be emphasized more by a rook switching to d1. So after castles, in fact, the f rook is used. And now, okay, so black is passive, and I guess he doesn't want to play a move like d5. That looks terrible. It looks as though it's going into a self pin actually against this bishop. But let's check that out tactically. Is d5 actually playable here? Let's have a look. Best play maybe c takes, e takes, maybe actually e4. There's also a nasty kind of pressure building up just with e4, because that queen's on d8 still. So this would be kind of unpleasant for black. So perhaps this is one of the better moves, or only move here, bishop e7. And now we have more pressure bearing on that poor d6 pawn with knight e4. So it seems with this position, white's forcibly getting rid of the light square bishop, unless black really wants to play d5 here. Does he really want to play d5? In fact, e5 is being suggested as well as bishop e4. But d5, I think, probably runs into something horrible. C takes, e takes, maybe just knight c3. Again, positional threat now of e4. Okay, So knight e4, black took on e4, queen takes e4. Looks like a pleasant position from the opening. Looks as though also, you know, look at these light squares, they're a bit weakened. This queen and bishop is looking nice. Imagine this pawn majority could be used in the future for a passed pawn. Then that's going to be a dangerous passed pawn supported with the light square bishop. Black's pawn majority on the other hand is in the centre. But it's the centre's under great pressure. Getting a passed pawn here is going to be tricky. Rook a7 anyway, the rook was attacked from the queen. Knight d4, which now means a knight move is going to be severely punished with knight c6, forking queen and rook. So carefully black plays rook c7, putting some pressure to bear it seems on c4. Proves illusionary by this next move, it's ignored with rook d2. The reason for that is here rook takes c4, I believe knight takes e6 with advantage to white, discovering an attack, attacking the queen. So that's pretty horrible here. Let's go for a little bit of analysis there. Knight takes e6, not such huge advantage apparently. Queen c8, interesting move, leaving queen and knight attacked, but now rook d4. Maybe this was seen by Magnus, this continuation. Had to be seen. But white's a little bit better here. Okay, so c4 wasn't taken. In fact, rook c5, which does kind of imply either black's going crazy for a kingside attack, or more likely just preparing b5 at some point in the future. Rook ad1. It looks as though d6 is still a central focus. Queen c7, and now finally Magnus is encouraged to defend his c-pawn. He plays b3, and black now plays a strange king h8. And you might wonder, well, is b5 on the cards here? Let's have a look at b5. I think here taking and queen d3, this kind of subtlety might be in order here. And if b4, knight b5 with advantage to white. If b4, that would be a mistake, I think, as a rook c4. So actually I think the incisive move will be queen d3 with advantage to white. Okay, I'll put this analysis in the description of the video, by the way, an annotated PGN. So king h8, okay, so now queen b1 is interesting as well for what happens if b5 here. Now I'm keeping an emphasis on the liberating break b5 because a lot of people playing this hedgehog system with black might think b5 is a natural thing to play for. Using that semi-open c file for black is black's trump card, surely, you might ask. This is black's focus of attack, whilst this might be white's. But in this case, if b5 here, c takes, and now b4 is possible without rook c4 pinning the knight. So imagine now rook c4, there's knight takes b5 anyway, so the rook must keep protection on b5. So say it does artificially kind of play rook h5, it's decentralizing. Queen d3, and white's got a pleasant position here. So forget that. After queen b1, this b5 seems to be ruled out. So knight d7 was played anyway. And now we have e3, which makes the knight kind of sturdy. Okay, it weakens some squares, apparently. So you might think, well, what actually is going on with this e3 move? It's actually a very good question. It's one of those subtle moves. I can't quite put my finger on what the major point is. It could be sort of seen later, perhaps. Let's just go with the flow here. Okay, I mean, what is an engine recommendation for a start? Okay, let's just check it out. Why would e3 be good here? In fact, it is recommended by Houdini as a kind of move which seems to just stabilise the knight, but at the same time weakens some squares. But now it's off the horizon, maybe a4 and queen e4. But what is e3 doing? I wonder. I really wonder. Okay. Let's say B5 here. Is there something subtle going on with B5 again? B4 Rook C4. I wouldn't have thought so. Actually here we do have a clue. Bishop F1 is now a useful resource. Perhaps this is the deep explanation that actually E3 is about providing the resource Bishop F1. That does make sense against B5. Okay, that's one theory anyway. If you have some other theories about E3, please let me know. So Queen C8. Okay, so black is clearly not keen on B5, and now Magnus is piling up behind the C pawn, away from the D pawn. So is this kind of positional prophylaxis? Rook C7, now definitely A4 looks as though it's prophylaxis against B5. Clearly an iron grip finally on that B5 square, with Bishop F1 in reserve just in case some extra pressure is needed on that diagonal. So black looks passive. Rook D8. So we're at move 23 now. So one of the up-and-coming FIDE rated players in the world, Gashimov, is being squeezed on the queen side. The counterplay before it even started, there's an iron grip being placed on his liberating break B5. Subtle little positional moves accumulating here, maybe for a potentially crushing positional advantage. This next little move, I can only imagine it's got a threat of A5. I think that's the main intention. Of course it also strengthens C4, which means actually B4 might also be on the cards more likely in the future. Maybe if the knight was going to C5, there's an eviction possible with B4 anyway, and then white could carry on with something else. So it's dual purpose, I think. A5 and supporting C4, this Queen A2 move. Knight E5, as though B4 may be ruled out, but also is it provoking white to try and kick this knight? At the moment, E3 would be terribly weak if F4 immediately, knight G4. Perhaps Magnus, he wants to play for F4 to kick this pesky knight, drive back black. But engines, well, my engine Houdini seems to like A5 here anyway, just not playing with the knight at the moment. But Magnus's strategy, like when I witnessed his win against Vladimir Kramnik, often in the English opening, it starts actually with kind of restricting the opponent's knight. When he beats Kramnik spectacularly in the London Classic first round, not in the recent one, in the year before, Kramnik's knights were kind of both, one of them at least, was heavily restricted. Okay, so this knight on E5, in this variation, from an engine point of view, it doesn't have to be dislodged with H3 and F4. It's okay to play A5 immediately, apparently, in this position. Houdini likes A5 here, which seems to be a good justification of the queen on C4 for supporting A5 and securing C4 even more, just in case. But anyway, so H3 was the plan chosen by Carlsen, by Magnus. So he wants to play F4 without knight G4 clearly. So he's driving back the black pieces. Bishop F6, and now actually, okay, why isn't F4 played here? Why was this Rook CD2 played? Is there a problem with F4 here, you might ask? Some sort of subtle problem. So let's try that. F4, knight G6, and couldn't Rook D2 be played here? Maybe D5 is possible. That seems, actually, in this position, it gives us equal. For some reason, D5, I'll just show you a bit more of that. D5, about equal here. So what's going on? It's not A5, CD, is that falling into something? I'm not sure. Okay, black's got that C file pressure. There's a blockade, it seems, on D pawn, but maybe this isn't so hot. Rook C3 might demonstrate this E3 isn't so hot. I don't know. It's about equal anyway. So Magnus, he's not in a rush to play F4. He plays Rook CD2. These delicate little moves all the time, which make this game kind of intriguing and a sort of element of like Mozart playing chess. This is how Mozart would play. These very, very delicate strokes here, brush strokes. So Rook C5 and now F4. Is there a subtle difference? After knight g6, rook d3. So you might ask here, is d5 kind of ruled out then? If it was good earlier, why not d5 here? Instead, h6 was played. What problem would there be with d5? Is it to do with queen d2, something subtle like that? Here, c takes, e takes. Right, c3 is covered now actually, so there's an option if rook c3 maybe to just take. In fact, that is a good option, queen d2 apparently, and that secures e3 and white will be slightly better here. So a little subtlety again has made way for this queen d2 maybe. I mean, these moves are very, very tricky to appreciate what is going on. It's like intricate stuff. That queen d2 is now a subtle possibility against d5 maybe. It's speculation, of course. It's difficult to try and gain empathy for this level of play. Okay, so a lot of this is just speculation. h6, but actually queen d2 is played, so that's greater evidence that was indeed one of the ideas of rook d3. So d5, it looks to be made unattractive now. And actually e5 was chosen, deliberately weakening d5. And, you know, this is like a riot from black to break out of the bind. Because now another break is used, b5. So e5 followed by b5. Black's willing to try and break the sort of binds of this counterplay restriction. But now Magnus, he punishes b5. He just takes on b5 and plays knight a3. And he's ending up generating, actually, out of black's counterplay on the queen side, an important passed pawn on the queen side. B takes, knight takes c4. Instead of a 3-2 pawn majority before, we've got a dangerous passed pawn, potentially. And now, again, another liberating move. Black doesn't want to be suffocated with white maybe playing rook d5 here. We would have a horrible kind of Sveshnikov type position where white would have numerous threats. Also, of course, d6 could also be taken as an option. White doesn't just want to blockade but actually eliminate d6. That looks like a viable option as well, especially knight takes d6. Looks pretty devastating as well. So d5 is played here with the idea of decoying this bishop away from h3 to win at least h3 and getting rid of black's weakened, backward d6 pawn. So it seems like a good idea to get this queen h3 in. Queen takes h3. But now queen g2. And black, Gashimov doesn't mind exchanging queens here. Now I wonder why, is it possible that black could have played something else apart from queen takes g2? If we add a bit to here, okay, apparently anything is worse. So say queen g4 as an example. Apparently b4's actually a really strong move. b4 or bishop f3. Actually, bishop f3 is pretty nasty because it unleashes some pressure on d8. So say queen c8, rook takes, bishop takes. Knight d6 here is attacking the queen in f7. So black now struggles actually to defend this position because actually this is a good decoy for rook takes d8. So in this forcing sequence, this is starting to be looking horrible. Either bishop e4 or bishop d5. It's horrible for black here. Okay, so that shows that maybe, just maybe, that queen g4 is not particularly hot. Queen f5, e4. And that's useful for white here. And now again this little tactic, maybe bishop takes f7 on d8. Well, quite an obvious one, taking on f7 there. Maybe, but now actually no, it's not so obvious because e takes f4 looks dangerous, but bishop takes, queen takes, g takes, and again white would stand a bit better, clearly better, nearly a pawn up. Not so hot. Okay, queen h5. I don't know. Okay, it's still a little bit better anyway. It's getting better technically. So basically, black felt the need anyway to exchange off queens. After king takes, now takes on f4. Now protects his f7 with rook c7. f7 was under fire. This knight's getting restricted though. This is like becoming a classic Carlsen theme in the English opening. Knight e3, which now means a few things actually. That bishop c4 is possible if white wants to challenge that d file. Knight g4 or f5 is on the cards potentially. There's a few benefits. It covers c2, so maybe also the b pawn is now free to run without c4 being a liability to rook takes d5 and rook takes c4. So all of these advantages is making white's position less tactically loose. So rook cd7, and the knight does actually come to g4, threatening to double black's pawns with knight takes f6. That's avoided. Knight f2, as though the knight's now threatening, menacing moves like knight e4, maybe to c5 later, or just to protect the rook for something like bishop takes f7. So that rook takes d3 is not winning a rook. So bishop f7, rook takes, and rook takes d8 is also now introduced maybe as a threat. So that pawn's actually moved out of the way, and then we have bishop e4, forcing off if Magnus wants one pair of rooks, but he's in no rush to take the rooks here after knight f8, which protects d7. He just pushes his past outside pawn now, and it seems okay. We have one pair of rooks off, and this is taken by the knight actually, not by the rook. So taking with the knight now threatens knight takes b2. The bishop moves. Now rook c1, and it looks as though white's trump cards are really built up here. He's got an outside pass pawn, control of the c file. Nice bishop on these light squares. Nice knight. It's all looking very nice. Knight c5, bishop e3. Rook c3, evicting the bishop. Check. Bishop goes to d4 actually. Rook c4. And then we have g6. Okay, as if maybe f5 could be on the cards. But now knight d3 attacks the bishop because it's blocked the connection with the rook, protecting that. Bishop g1. Rook c8, again forcing black's hand to do something about the knight. Now check. So getting basically a rook on the 7th with still white to play with that rook c8 move, rook c7. And now f5 restricting this knight again. Poor knight being restricted. It's a theme. It's definitely a theme I've noticed in Carlsen's positional wins in the English opening. Very attractive one. g5 and now g4. Really kind of okay. It looks as though white's getting a new bind, and this pass pawn's ready to go now. Bishop h2 attacking the rook. The rook moves. In fact, in front of the pawn, maybe counterintuitively, you could argue, but there's other things going on now in the position. After rook c2, knight c5, and the knight's destined maybe for e6, where it would be horribly threatening lots of things. If the bishop wasn't covering b8, then rook b8 would be a threat to coordinate pressure on that poor knight on f8. Check. King moves h5, trying to break out the bind again on this side, but losing a pawn in the process. Is black's pass pawn going to be worth it to generate this counterplay? If black does nothing, I guess it's a very unpleasant position now if he doesn't sacrifice a pawn. So say king h8, what will white be doing? Okay, let's check this out. Knight e6. Let's say bishop d6 protecting that. Now b5, and even though opposite coloured bishops of these knights were exchanged, this is very dangerous for black. Bishop f3 say. The pass pawn gets pushed, and it's starting to look critical with this pawn on b6. The king marches up even more so. So rook b8, and black's on the way out, I think. Rook d8, and that's actually threatening rook takes d6 and knight f8 now. So no rook b6 I think there. So bishop e7, rook e8 and b7. This is pushing black to the limits, this kind of variation. So basically maybe this is why h5 was tried to generate some counterplay with black having now a pass pawn. Knight e6 anyway. In fact, if G3, I wonder that disconnection with B8 could be exploited with Rook B8. I wonder if this would be a huge blunder. Rook B8 is indeed a strong move here. I thought maybe there's other possibilities. Like there's H6 is strong here, but Rook B8 does exploit that, so that would be unpleasant. Clearly, Rook C8, stopping these Rook B8s maybe. Now B5. So is Black really going to push the pawn? No, he just wants to try and draw with an opposite colour bishop ending. But is it enough? So Rook's come off. Bishop D5. But can Magnus just simply round up this pawn and use his two outside passed pawns? Isn't that going to be too much for the dark square bishop to handle Black's remaining pieces? In fact, I thought that Magnus's plan was to get the king over, maybe to the centre and over, but no. Now he plays King F1 as if he's going for this pawn like this. Bishop E3 and now King G2. Okay, and after King F7, Magnus doesn't mind the raw opposite colour bishop pawn ending. He goes in for this, and he's got these two killer outside passed pawns really, which the bishop it's overloaded. Once the E3 square is taken away from Black, like with this move King F3, it's all over. Just B6 here, and it's all over. If Black gets tied down, if he tries to defend over there, I think the king will just go in as one option. So here actually Black resigned. If King takes B7, but let's have a look at some other possibilities. So say King here, tie the Black king down to C7, and now the king can start marching. So this bishop, although it's stopping the passed pawn, if the king can make an entrance like this, doesn't matter about bishop C6 because that pawn's tying down the king. Now the king can just march in to town. So that will be it for Black here. Maybe just King F7. Anything's probably winning here. King F7, and then just herding the pawn, or just taking here and just herding the pawn. So anything is winning. Actually, you might ask, what about this bishop attacking B8? Well, actually, it's overloaded. It's always overloaded with the two passed pawns. So here, H7 is going to be winning. White doesn't even have to take on F6. That could be handy in some variations, but it's just all over with the Black bishop helpless here. So that's one sort of plan. So basically, in this position, Black resigned. Okay. Let's get ready to do an overview and summary of this game from start. Okay, let's do an overview and summary. So knight F3, it was an English opening with Black parrying the fianchetto, however you want to pronounce it. Opening up the centre, pressure on D6. Now taking on F6, so he's exerting more and more pressure on D6, and he encourages bishop takes E4 now from Black, which weakens some light squares. And now tactically Rook C4 isn't on because of knight takes E6. So curiously now after B3, there's a nice manoeuvre with the queen here, Queen B1, and it's going to play A4 and Queen A2, which supports not only C4 but A5, but first E3 also means bishop F1 could come handy just in case Black wants to play for B5. B5 will be a target, but it's really clamped down now after Queen C8 this sequence with A4, so a lot of stuff to do with clamping down B5. But Black times his counterplay, so it kicks off with this knight being evicted for an E5 and B5 sequence very shortly. So E5 and now B5, as though Black's trying to break the binds, the shackles of the position, but at some small price here. That White now gets a passed pawn and is able to get the queens off because Black wants to liberate that D pawn, not have a backward pawn prisoner. So the queens come off, and now we enter a difficult endgame for Black when this knight is a subject of being restricted gradually, and white's outside pawn and minor pieces start to get quite active and maybe superior in some way to black's, because the rook is nicely on the c file, the light squared bishop is nicely on this diagonal, and it seems to be a high pressure situation for black, with this knight kind of potentially being pinned by rook c8, but it's kind of tied in now with another bind on the position, with Magnus playing for this, so he's shutting down that knight considerably now from key squares, and he's like playing almost with an extra piece and a passed b pawn, so it does seem to be kind of very attractive positional game. And now this pawn sacrifice, but otherwise white's going to be improving the position slowly but surely. So in this situation, the opposite colour bishops are shown not to really be saving black. The bishop's simply overloaded by the two outside passed pawns. So a bit of a positional masterpiece, this game. Magnus has made it look kind of easy-ish. So it shows on the white side of an English that the counterplay with b5 can be managed quite effectively with some subtle moves, and you can eventually see your 3-2 pawn majority turn into an outside passed pawn. And but there were lots of other aspects of the play of Magnus, you know, showing better minor pieces, the restriction of the knight, a lot of positional ideas indeed in this game. So a great game. Hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.